On July 2nd of 2025, Bryan Kohberger pleaded guilty to all the charges that he faced in, accepting a plea deal. So the charge was 1 count of burglary, 4 counts of first-degree murder, and he will be sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison on July 23rd of 2025. The judge also said that he's going to reserve July 24th of 2025 for more sentencing procedures in case they need to do that, but they think that they could complete the whole sentencing process in 1 day. So make sure that you subscribe with your notifications on, because I will be streaming whatever will be shown. I say that because there will be victim impact statements on that day as well. And oftentimes in Idaho, they don't actually stream victim impact statements, but I'm hoping because they streamed Chad Daybell's sentencing and victim impact statements that maybe we'll be able to see that in this case as well. Either way, whatever they're going to show, we're going to watch together, so I hope to see you there. Now, the point of today's video is to actually go over a part of the hearing that we watched together on July 2nd of 2025, especially for those of you who missed it or those of you who think like me. And what I sometimes do from a hearing like that is, yes, you can go and listen to it again. I've linked it below for you. But also I like to read the transcripts of what happened, what was said. Now, by transcripts, I don't mean court-ordered transcripts. I mean literally the transcripts that are generated by YouTube, so like closed captioning. I like to get those and print them out and sit with a highlighter with a cup of coffee and just go over everything that the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, for example, said, and just see if there's anything that I missed, because, different formats. You can watch things, you can hear things, you can read things. And so sometimes when I read things after watching things once or twice, then I pick up new things, right? So if you're anything like me, then this video is for you, because that's exactly what I did. I printed out those transcripts and I went over everything that Bill Thompson said. And while doing that, I actually read it to you. So that's what this video is. I'm reading you the transcripts from YouTube that I had generated and printed out. All right. So now tell me in the comments below, while you listen, make some notes for yourself and tell me if there's anything, like afterwards. Once you've made your notes, tell me in the comment section, is there anything that you learned that was new information to you? Obviously, the state's recitation is not going to be the same amount of, by no means, this is an understatement, the same amount of evidence we would have seen if the case had gone to trial. And a lot of people are upset about that, including the families, of course. Some of the families are like, but we want to know why. We want to know the details. We want to know what happened here, right? Now, there's a little bit of hope in that at some point, a lot of these evidence files will become public record. And so we can make Freedom of Information Act requests or FOIA requests and hopefully obtain some information that we could analyze together. If that's possible, then of course I'll be working on that, but I don't think yet. Okay, normally it would be 30 or 90 days after the person is sentenced. Only then can you even start making requests. So we'll just be patient with that and see what we can get and when we can get it. But at this hearing, the judge asked for the state's recitation, which would be an overview of the case that they were going to present to the jury. And so that is what I'm going to go over. Now, it's not that much more detailed than the probable cause affidavit, but there were a couple of things in there that I think was like, oh, that was new. We didn't know that. So let's go over just those little points, right? Okay, so that's what this is. Thank you so much for watching, and let's get right to it. Okay, so State Prosecutor Bill Thompson said, Your Honor, the organization of the recitation is different than what I think the court and the public may be familiar with from the probable cause affidavit and other documents. So what I'm reading here, if there's something here that you think is different from what we'd heard before, something new that you learned, let me know in the comments below. So then it says, the state's evidence is an overview that would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing in his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, the sheath, and the sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, with the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate the beginning was July 9th of 2022. So it is interesting to consider he bought the K-bar knife and sheath and a sharpener in March of 2022 already. And remember, the crime occurred November 13th of 2022. Mr. Kohberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court in all presence that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night or early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., approximately 23 times. Now, I will acknowledge also that we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with the residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area at those times in the interim. On August 22nd of 2022, Lake Tahoe County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m. on the west side of Moscow on Pullman Road. This is the traffic stop of Mr. Kohberger's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Kohberger's name, Bryan Kohberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then moved to the early morning hours of November 13th of 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence, which is in an apartment in kind of the northwest part of Pullman. So it was called the Steptoe Apartments. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until about 4:45 a.m. On Sunday, the 13th of November, the state's evidence would include a trial, a video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman highway, just across from the state line from Moscow. It would show that a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m. Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then showed the defendant's car, the white Elantra as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area. That neighborhood starting around 3:30 or so in the morning, comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaving several times. Approximately 4:05 that morning, the defendant's car had entered the area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road to do the U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence. So we didn't know that before. I think that was new, to know exactly where he parked. The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 King Road through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. The defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and, with a knife, killed Madison Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves. The defendant, as he left that room for whatever reason, ended up leaving the sheath of a K-bar knife on the bed next to Madison Mogen's body. And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single-source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important to note, single-source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath. The state's evidence would show that Xana Kernodle was awake at this time, in fact had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the 3rd floor, it was on the 2nd floor on the west side of the building. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife. Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence that there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so that there's no speculation. There were 2 other roommates in the house and they were already asleep. Now that, I don't know why the prosecutor is still saying that, because based on the documents, DM and BF were certainly not asleep. You know. That was confusing. Also, I do want to add that there is something known as picarism, which is, it has a sexual component where someone is aroused by stabbing someone. In fact, the terminology for it is picarism, refers to a sexual interest in penetrating the skin of another person with sharp objects. So it could have a sexual component, but I understand that he's saying it wasn't SA. During the course of this, one of the roommates awoke, looked out her door, not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with a black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen where that sliding door is that I mentioned before. At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, the defendant's car is seen on surveillance camera of 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would see that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walenta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town. Now, we did see some of that from the Dateline episode, remember? The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time, so we know that he went through a variety of back roads in a very rural, isolated part of Latah County. About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks him back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived. About 5:26 a.m., starting approximately around 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived approximately 5:30 that morning. Later that morning, still this Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He's there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence. About 9:30, the state's evidence will show evidence taken from the defendant's phone that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up. The defendant's phone then went into the Lewiston-Clarkson Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined on November 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that the following Sunday, November 13th of 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar sheath, as the state believes to replace the one that was left at the scene of the murders. The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence will show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, the motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington. That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicle seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate, Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays. Law enforcement at this point were aware of Mr. Kohberger, had been accessing information about him and were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Lab, where the lab experts were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Mogen's body in the bed. Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I could tell the court, the public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. So they answered that because we all wanted to know, did they ever find that knife? I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind of characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings. In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized. It was actually pretty much disassembled internally, and it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, and those compartments in the doors. We try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree, of dirt in there, and they were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside, and the state would present to the jury that that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this crime. The defendant had studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees. We've gone over that before, so check that out on the playlist. And he had that knowledge and skill. So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th of 2022. And then he says, excuse me, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence of 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, and deliberately with premeditation and with malice aforethought. Maddy Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. Thank you, Honor. Thank you. So that's what he said. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, please do hit the like button and share as well. And I really look forward to reading your comments below. There's still a couple of things, that I want to discuss in this case as we wait for sentencing to happen. So make sure that if you are not yet subscribed and you do want to follow updates in this case and all the others that we also are following, just check that you subscribe, right? Because YouTube will sometimes just, automatically unsubscribe you, especially when there's updates and things. Also, if you haven't yet checked out my Patreon, I hope that you will. It's patreon.com/Grizzly True Crime. There's behind the scenes content over there, little voice clips or mini podcast episodes, pictures of the cats, exclusive content that you won't get anywhere else. and it's only $1. Like, all tiers get the same access to all the same content, and it starts at $1. So I hope that you'll check it out over there. Until then, I will see you in the next one. Stay safe.